Hello, stargazers and moonwatchers, and welcome to the Compendium Cast. I am your host, Jason Ashcraft. Okay, we're keeping that intro.
Good one.
Yeah. Welcome, everybody. We are once again joined by Erik Hanson of Cradle to the Grave podcast. How are you doing today, Erik?
Man, I'm doing good. Excited to be back on your podcast to talk about another Arthur C. Clarke, not Stanley Kubrick movie.
Right. Yeah, I'm glad to have you back, man. I had so much fun talking about 2001 with you. It's still one of my favorite episodes to just get a geek out on that movie. And honestly, rewatching 2010, I love this movie too. There's so much to say that we'll dive into as we move along in the movie, but there were genuine parts of this movie that, now kind of seeing them in new lights and you're trying to dissect them for the podcast that I really appreciate. And there just aren't films and a lot of stories like this. So I'm really excited. It is a much different feel from 2001, not only because it's almost 20 years later from the original, but as you mentioned, different director, different times. I mean, decades go, things change, the way filming's done change. But all that being said, I personally think it was still a great film. What are your initial thoughts with 2010?
Well, with 2010, so I first watched this back in the 80s because I'm hella old, Jason. I'm hella old, dude. And this came out, like you said, 1984, which I was 13. So I was into, Star Wars and Star Trek II Wrath of Khan just recently came out. And so when I saw the 2010 science fiction movie, like, yeah, cool, right on. And I'm trying to think, I probably had seen 2001 at that time and hated the shit out of it.
You do mention that in the other podcast that 18-year-old Erik wasn't feeling it.
Man, no. But I remember liking 2010 back in the 80s. And over the years, I have revisited this one, a few times. And every time I watch it, it's a serviceable movie. I like it, and I watched it again last week for this podcast. And my thoughts on this is, I feel bad for the director Peter Hyams.
Mm-hmm.
He had to follow Stanley Kubrick. Nobody wants to do that. Like,
right?
I mean, it's like the Sistine Chapel hired a painter to do the hallway after Michelangelo got done. It's like, yeah, I'm good. I don't want to follow that act. But Peter Hyams did. He followed the act, and it is a completely different vibe than 2001. And right from the start, it has its own feel. It has its own vibe. And mostly just because of Roy Scheider. He's actually acting. Nobody acts in 2001, Jason. It's just, and we covered that as well in the 2001 pod that we did, how the acting was just really stiff. There wasn't a lot of motion. but we get emotion right from the get-go when we meet Roy Scheider.
Yeah, and that is a major difference in this film. This film moves more like a traditional film would, right?
Yeah.
But I think it works, and I think it's great because, like you said, who wants to follow Stanley Kubrick? I like that Peter didn't try to, and he did his thing, but it still feels in universe. I guess there are some things that we'll get into that are a little different.
It's not a perfect film. I'm not saying it's like, one of the best films ever made. No, it has some flaws, but for what it is, it's good.
I loved it. But I love the stories. I mean, the books, the stories, everything about just what the 2001 just universe is. I love it, and we'll dive into that. But before we get into the movie and all that, let's break down the cast and their roles and all that. So as Erik mentioned, Peter Hyams is the director, and like we said, he opted for a more traditional narrative compared to Kubrick's more ambiguous kind of style. Writers was Peter Hyams, adapting the Arthur C. Clarke novel 2010 Odyssey 2. Right, so the movie's called The Year We Made Contact. The novel is just called Odyssey 2, which was published in 1982. The cinematography was also Peter Hyams. So this dude did a lot for this film. Music was David Shire. So it was a ship. They didn't really do the classical compositions like 2001. This was a more traditional score written for the movie, which it was fine. It worked. Visual effects were by Richard Edlund and his team using practical models and early CGI. And I have a lot to say about this when we get to a certain part.
Okay.
In a good way. Some of it's obviously dated, but it's 84. So cast, as mentioned, Roy Scheider as Dr. Heywood Floyd, a completely different Heywood Floyd than we get from the first movie. Which is another thing I kind of laughed about in this is it's when I first watched it like years ago, and then it hit that this is the same guy from the opening of 2001. It's like, oh wow, this doesn't even feel like the same person, right? John Lithgow as Dr. Curnow. And he's probably most known for Third Rock from the Sun, the TV show, or what, Harry and the Hendersons, I think.
Yeah.
Helen Mirren as Tanya Kerbuk. She's the Soviet commander. Then we have Bob Balaban as Dr. R. Chandra. He is the scientist who's responsible for reactivating HAL 9000 in this movie, but he also created HAL. And we get a lot more backstory, and there's a lot that I like about that from this story as well. And then we have Keir Dullea. He returns as David Bowman, and Douglas Rain returns as the voice of HAL 9000. And so there's a few other actors in this movie because there's a whole sort of Soviet team, and we'll get into all that. But to be honest, a lot of them I didn't catch their names because they never really referenced them by name a lot in this. So it's kind of up to you to figure it out. Quick box office receptions. It was released in December 7th, 1984. The budget was estimated around $28 million. It earned $40.4 million domestically. Not a bad success, but nowhere near 2001's. But 2001's was very groundbreaking. So it was generally positive from critics. Robert Ebert gave it 3 stars, calling it intelligent and absorbing. Some critics felt it lacked the artistic ambition of 2001, but fans appreciated its straightforward narrative. So it's sort of that give and take, right? It's a lot easier to follow for sure than 2001.
Oh yeah. It holds your hand through the whole movie. You got the voiceover and everything, man.
I had a comment about that. And I guess we'll kind of mention it now because I don't mention it in my notes really. There's so much voiceover in this movie where Heywood Floyd is like writing letters or voice messages back to his wife, but really all it is just explaining what's happening in the movie.
It's letters
it's like,
to
just
us.
show us, don't tell us, please. Yeah, it's letters to the audience of like everything that's about to happen, and it's like just show us. We don't need all these letters. So I literally don't mention any of those because it's just setting you up for the scene that's about to come.
Mhm.
And there's a ton of that in this movie. So maybe my biggest complaint is that about this movie for sure.
Yeah. I feel like there was a lot of voiceover back in the early 80s, like Blade Runner. Like
right.
I think Hollywood was like, "Ah, audiences are too stupid to figure shit out on their own. We need to explain what's happening." And
Right.
since then there's been, the director's cut of Blade Runner without the voiceover. Maybe they should come out with a director's cut of 2010 without the voiceover. I wonder how that would play out.
I'd like it. Yeah. Because that's the thing is that the voiceovers really add nothing, and I kind of
Not
just tuned it
really.
out. Yeah, I was like, but anyways, other than that, that's my biggest complaint. Plot summary. So this takes place 9 years after 2001, obviously 2010, right? It's in the name. Big conflict is the U.S. and Soviet Union are sort of at war with each other, and this was obviously, mirroring the Cold War, right?
Right.
And all that. So sort of the simple plot summary of this is the U.S. and Soviet joined together in exposition to go to Jupiter because they want to find out exactly what happened with the Discovery, the ship from 2001, and HAL 9000's malfunction. So that is what sets things in motions for what is to come in this movie. Before we get to our breakdown, is there anything you'd like to add? Anything I might have forgot to mention?
No, I think that covers the synopsis. This was, like you said, 1984. This movie came out, which was smack dab in the Cold War, between United States and Russia. So I can see how this probably played a lot better back then than it plays now. Not that we're buddy with Russia, especially with certain people in office right now, but the Soviet Union fell during the late 80s and the 90s, and so the Cold War kind of has ended. But yeah, in 84, this was a hot topic. This was forefront of the news. And I remember living through the fear of nuclear war was actually real, Jason. There was a movie called The Day After. You ever see The Day After about nuclear war? Came out in 1983.
Is that the one where they're trying to get to like explain it? I think I have.
It's got Jason Robards in it, and it takes place in Kansas. It has one location. John Lithgow is actually in it. Speaking of Lithgow, yeah, I think it was one of his first movies. And it tells a story of what would happen if a nuclear exchange between the United States and Russia took place. And it was a huge thing in 83. I remember watching it when I'm, that Sunday evening, and went to bed scared shitless because they name checked Bill Air Force Base, which is, right down the street from our house. So Cold War, man, like, yeah. So revisiting this film again, it kind of brought all those things back up. The relations between U.S. and the Soviet Union. It was big time back then, man. So, and I think Peter Hyams does a good job in maybe the tagline, "The year we make contact," is actually the year we make contact with the Soviet Union, and try to work together to solve this mystery that's going out in space. But because do we really make contact with the alien at the end of this movie, which I'm sure we'll get to, and we'll get more into depth on what happens at the end. But
I think yes, and I'll explain why I think that when we get there. Yeah. But also, I don't think they necessarily. I get what you're saying too, but I also don't think they necessarily mean contact with the, whatever the things are and the monoliths. But we'll dissect that when we get to the end.
We'll get there.
Yeah. All right, so let's break into our breakdown. And what I love is the first line of this movie is, "My God, it's full of stars." So exactly the last dialogue of 2001 is our first dialogue for this movie. Then we are just sort of hit with a just a summary of 2001.
Mhm.
Again, it's been almost 20 years, so probably just a reminder for people coming in. But I'm going to read it as it was written just because I liked it, and there's a reason for it that's going to sort of play a part. Well, it sets up the movie, but so it's
Mhm.
written out like a report. So I'm going to read it as a report. So mission background. Year 1999, location the moon, Sea of Tranquility, a black rectangular object found by the American expedition. Composition unknown, origin unknown, given name Tycho monolith. Signal sent from monolith towards Jupiter, reason unknown. And then it goes year 2001, location vicinity of Jupiter. Spacecraft USS Discovery. Flight crew Commander David Bowen, co-pilot Frank Poole. Scientific crew of 3 in deep hibernation to be awakened when Discovery reaches Jupiter. Logic circle HAL 9000. Mission status. As the spacecraft approached Jupiter's 2 major inner moons, Europa and Io, HAL 9000's computer malfunctioned. Scientific crew killed within hibernation when life support systems were shut off by HAL 9000. Co-pilot Frank Poole killed by HAL 9000 while outside the spacecraft. Commander David Bowen disconnected logic circuits of HAL 9000. Commander David Bowen encountered object between Jupiter and Io, the object identical to the monolith found on the moon, except in size. Monolith near Jupiter is 2 kilometers long. Commander Bowen left Discovery to investigate. Last transmission from Commander Bowen. My God, it's full of stars. Mission analysis. Reason for malfunction of HAL 9000? Unknown. Meaning of last Bowen transmission? Unknown. Location of Bowen? Unknown. Presumed dead. Composition of second monolith? Unknown. Position of second monolith. Lagrange point between Jupiter and Io. Position of USS Discovery. Orbit around Io. Condition of USS Discovery? Unknown. And then it says, end mission report. Filed by Haywood Floyd, Chairman of National Council of Astronautics, December 9th, 2001. And then once again, we hear this part was chilling for me. And I don't know if you felt the same going to see it as you when you were younger, for the first time after 2001. But then it's like, my God, it's full of stars. And then you get hit with the iconic 2001 theme song with the opening credits. I thought that was pretty well done, personally.
Yeah.
Really liked that.
It was cool to get that refresher, when you start this movie and it kind of like you just read, it really sets you up for, all right, all this shit's unknown. I can't wait for it to be known because hopefully this movie's going to answer all the questions I have.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Like there's unknown. Exactly. Yeah. Then we just cut to sort of a satellite field. So it kind of reminds me of SETI, right? If you're familiar with those. So I don't know if this is what this is.
I believe that was filmed at it's called the Very Large Array in New Mexico, I believe. Okay. It's featured in the movie Contact, which we also talked about in our 2001 chat. I keep bringing up Contact. Yeah. So that's it's just like a string of satellites somewhere in New Mexico.
Now, at some point, it's mentioned that he's in Central America. So in this future world, maybe that's where he's working, or there's some conflict within. They keep saying Central America, and I forgot the significance. But we see Lloyd up on one of the satellites, and he's just cleaning it, right? And this Russian gentleman comes up to him and starts talking to him, and through the interaction, we learn that Floyd, he's now working as a professor at a university by choice. He was blamed for the failure of the Discovery mission, and he blames himself as well. So he holds a lot of guilt for having the men go up there and, getting killed and, all that stuff. And so it seems like Floyd's, obviously he holds the resentment for himself, but he's taking a lot of flack because he's automatically like very standoffish with this gentleman. Like, who the hell are you? What do you want? Like, as soon as he starts talking about the Discovery mission and Floyd's sort of disgrace, he's very like, okay, like you can fuck off now, like he doesn't really want anything to do with this man. But then they also make a comment, and this is where we get our first glimpse of like the obvious tension between Russia and America, because both of them are like, we both understand sort of the risk of me coming here talking to you, right?
Yeah.
And Floyd agrees, but then the man says, I never got the guy's name. It might have been mentioned at some point, but
Yeah.
I just call him. He's just the man. He plays a small role, so it's fine. But he says, we are scientists. Our governments are the enemy, not us.
Mm-hmm.
This is when Floyd kind of tells him, to get to the point. Like, what do you want? And we find out that both Americans and the Soviets are working to get spacecrafts to Jupiter to go back and find out what happened to the Discovery and everything going on up there. And here's where it all kind of comes together, that this guy's telling him, we will reach it a year before you guys will. Like, that's just fact. However, we don't have the knowledge we need to really make the trip worthwhile, right? So it comes down. So this is when Floyd realizes, okay, he wants to work together. Like, they need Floyd's help. So it's one of those, like, we're gonna get there before you, but we don't have what we need to complete the mission. You do, but you won't get there before us. Mm-hmm. And this is where they sort of have the exchange of, like, well, how can we convince our people, if you will, to allow us to go together? And the Russian says, like, well, I can spin it. It'll look good for us. Like, oh, poor Americans had to hitch a ride with us Russians. And, Floyd's like, well, how do I spin this to my people? We would obviously love to see you fail. Mm-hmm. This is where he says, well, have you been keeping track of the Discovery's orbit? And he just leaves them with that. He's like, you're a smart man. You'll figure it out. So Floyd's like, of course we have. Like, what do you mean? So this is where we see Floyd, we cut to a scene of him going to check the orbit. And in the moment, we don't know exactly what's going on, but now he's suddenly on a bench with a man right in front of the White House. Mm-hmm. And it's the new NCA chairman. And he tells him that essentially Discovery is losing its orbit. Something is going on. Its orbit is unnatural, right? So they feel that the monolith has something to do with this, because, again, just to recap for everybody, right, there's that giant monolith we see at the end of 2001 that's floating around Jupiter and Io and all that stuff. So that's still there. It's still doing monolithy stuff, right? And so basically now, by the way, this new NCA chairman is very much on Floyd's side. He's like, I didn't want your job. Like, you're the one who you stepped down and all this. But he's like, within an hour, I'm going to walk across this yard and have lunch with the president. How am I supposed to convince him to let you go up, with the Russians to do this, mm-hmm. And this is when, again, they're saying, like, the Discovery is about to fall into Io and we're going to lose it. So basically that is where it comes to, because as Floyd said, like, we'd love to see you guys fail, or at least the government would, but unfortunately time is now running out, they realize. So they don't have that year to wait to get up there themselves.
Yeah.
So go ahead.
I like the opening of this film. I like Roy Scheider. He is not your average leading man. He's a good looking guy, but he's no Harrison Ford, right?
Right.
He's always been kind of like the everyman, like in Jaws. He kind of downplays his role and lets, Quint and Hooper take the forefront. So I like his style, and I like his acting. And so right from the get-go, like I said in the start of this chat, that we get some acting, and I'm invested because I like Roy Scheider. He was pretty big in '84. He was just coming off of Blue Thunder, which was a big, huge hit. And so when he shows up, I'm like, yeah, cool. And he totally, the first Haywood Floyd, I forget that actor's name. Like you say, like, who is this guy? That's Haywood Floyd. Like, oh, okay. And then we have the other actor, which we don't know his name, but he has a really bad Russian accent. And I don't think he was Russian. And so I like how when they're talking, they're like, okay, For the next, they do like this. How about we tell the truth for 30 seconds or a minute?
2 minutes.
And, yeah, 2 minutes. And
yeah.
Shatter's like a minute and a half. Okay, fine. We'll do a minute and a half. We're going to tell nothing but the truth. And I thought that was pretty cool when they have that exchange. And that's when, like you said, Shatter finds out, like, oh shit, the Russians are going to beat us there. We need to work together. And yeah, so cool opening. Starts on the ground. It doesn't start in space, just like 2001 starts on the ground. And so I think it's a pretty cool cold opening to this film.
Absolutely. I agree. I liked it. And it's such a different character. And I have thoughts on that too, because this is supposed to be 9 years later, but somehow he's younger. You know, a lot more sassy. I guess we could say that would happen when, you know, it
would be yourself. So like if you watched these two movies, if you knew nothing about these movies, you know, and like, oh, it's 2001 and 2010, the sequel, I'm going to watch them back to back. They don't mesh. They don't like, they're like, what? Is this the same universe? What's going on?
Right. Yeah, and I'll have more to say about that here in a little bit.
The books do, right? So I've read,
absolutely.
We've both read both of, or all three of the Arthur C. Clarke novels, and of course, those all mesh perfectly well. But the movies, not so much.
Yeah, but it's also telling of the times. Again, as we keep saying, it's almost 20 years later, so this feels more in line with something that would come out in the 80s. And like you said, Roy was kind of a little hot in the 80s. And so it works for this movie. He's a great Floyd. For the character he's supposed to be.
Absolutely.
Yeah. It's just funny, like you said, because we're kind of watching them back to back because we're doing the podcast. That's when you really kind of notice these things. But if you don't think about it, and Floyd's such a small character in the first movie that it doesn't matter. It really doesn't matter, you know. So we're back at them on the bench, and he's telling them, I want 3 Americans to go with the Russians. Himself, this guy Chandra, who made Hal. And so he's the one who can turn Hal back on, and he's the one that he trusts to keep Hal in line, I guess, because obviously no one knows what happened. They're worried about the malfunction. And then there's Cradle, and he is building the Discovery 2. So he's like, no one knows Discovery better than him. So he's who I would trust to be able to go back up there and essentially restore power to the Discovery. So, and he wants himself to go because he says he feels like he owes it to the men, you know, because again, he lives with that guilt of the original mission and blames himself for their deaths. Right. So we have all that happening,
which I think is fucked up, man. Floyd didn't do anything. It was Hal. It was, if you want to blame anybody, which I guess they do place blame later in this movie, you know, blame the government for keeping secrets and confusing, you know, Hal's directives.
Right.
It wasn't with Floyd.
Yeah. Well, we don't know that yet, everybody. Listeners. Yeah.
Sorry, my
spoilers on a very old movie. Yeah. But yes, you are correct. But as of now, and of course the government's not going to put the blame on themselves. They got their scapegoat with with Floyd, so let him take the hit, you know.
Yeah.
But anyways, so on the bench, right? Wants those 3 men to go. Now we cut and we get to see Chandra for the first time. He goes into his office and he has a Sal 9000. So it's the woman version of Hal. Yeah. And you can see he also wonders a lot of what happened. He can't understand what happened. He's like, I don't see how this happened. Like he mentions with Sal, you know, about how they've had many discussions about Hal and what could have gone wrong, and they're trying to theorize and discover it. And so he mentions to Sal, like, hey, you know, I'm going to be going up to the Discovery sooner than expected to kind of figure out what's going on. And he talks to Sal. And what's cool about this character is he talks to Sal as if she is a real entity. Obviously not a person, it's not flesh, but you know, whereas most people see these still as just computers, he respects what they are and that they are intelligent. You know, I don't know if life forms is the right word.
I think he has feelings for these computers.
Yeah,
you know,
and I get that. I mean, if he is the father of these machines, if you will, I can understand that. There's that connection he has that others won't. But he talks to Sal, and we find he wants to run a test on her before he goes up. He wants to disconnect her the same way Hal was disconnected, and he wants to see what will happen when he reconnects her, right? And it's cool because he kind of asks her how she feels about this. Like he wants her consent, you know. And before she's disconnected and does it, she asks Chandra, "Will I dream?" You know, and he replies, "Of course, all intelligent beings dream. No one knows why." And then he says, "Perhaps you will dream of Hal, just as I often do." You know, so kind of a cool moment. I don't know if it was meant to, again, show that intelligence, because it's one of those things where we can go all day. Why would a computer ask if they will dream? But if they're programmed to ask that, then they would ask it. So, you know, we get into that tricky, like, God, how do you really know what's true artificial intelligence? You know, at what point is it all program algorithms and it's real sentient thoughts? You know,
I
don't know.
I think it was a mistake to not bring Sal on the voyage with them.
Oh, really?
You know, I think it would have been really cool if Sal met Hal, right?
Right.
And they had some kind of interaction. But this is the last time we see Sal in the movie, and you know she's gone for the rest of the film. But you know, Hal eventually they reconnect him, but we'll get to. I was just like, man, how cool would that have been, you know, if Sal came on the voyage with him? But I guess the Russian ship doesn't have the same computers and whatnot.
That was going to be my thought. Is the only thing I could think is, you know, Sal is probably American property.
Yeah.
They wouldn't. Why would they give that willingly to a Soviet device? You know, ship.
Right.
So
they could have brought like a little Sal briefcase with them or something.
He's got his own little Sal laptop. Yeah, why not? It's 2010.
He's got that laptop on the beach, man. That big clunky thing that Roy Scheider has on the beach.
Yeah. Well,
what do you think about the production design? Do you think the futuristic technology, they did a good job, or does it kind of look dated?
I mean, it definitely looks dated, but I love watching these. You know, Alien comes to mind. I don't know this because it never takes away from it, you know, of these films. But I like these older films that show these futuristic, advanced ideas, like we can go to Jupiter, right? Or Alien, you know, they're out there in space, but the technology still looks like it looks, right? We have these old clunky laptops or these old giant monitors, you know. So I like it. I think now obviously looks dated. I mean, I got 3 monitors here, flat screen, you know, cell phone. So definitely dated, but it didn't bother me. There was never a moment of, you know.
Yeah, it was never too like Star Trek-y. I thought they did. When we get into the ship per se, like they did a really good job with the Russian ship and the Discovery.
Yeah, I agree. I enjoy it, man. There's this simplicity to it, and it never, even when watching Alien, it never takes away. And I don't know, it is a flavor that I like. So I like it. I do like it. Cool. Yeah. All right. So now we're just kind of setting up the characters, right? Because now we cut to Floyd's house, and this dude has straight up 2 dolphins as pets, by the way, everybody. But
which is pretty awesome.
Yeah, because at first you just see the dolphins, right? And you're like in the water, but then you see them fly. Yeah, they swim into this house area, and right there's this dinner table with Floyd and his wife eating, and their son is feeding these dolphins fish. But you find out in passing in their conversation that the mother studies dolphins, so I guess that made a little more sense. By the way, this house is amazing, and I don't know, just
very cool architecture. I mean, that whole
on a professor's salary,
dolphins coming into the living room. That had to have been, somebody had to have done that eventually after seeing this. They're like, I need to have a dolphins come into my room now.
Right.
There has to be some home out there that copied that design.
Yep. So at the dinner, we're just kind of seeing that Floyd is very much in his own world. Like who's ever like someone's trying to talk to you, but you're just completely spaced out. not hearing them, staring off into the void. She's telling him, I don't want you to come to my lecture. I'll be embarrassed or something, which interesting, but okay. But the point is he's not listening. He's like, he's gone.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And he kind of snaps back into reality. And this is when he tells her, like, hey, yeah, so I'm going on that flight to Discovery. And you can see the sort of look in her face of like, excuse me.
Does he say how long he's going to be gone?
Later. He does. Yeah. He doesn't in this moment, but they do mention that he's going to be gone for. I don't know if he says exactly, but he's like talking to his kid, like in the next scene, and mentions that he's going to be gone. But also, this is where I had a sidebar. This was my thing of like, this is 9 years later, and not only does Floyd look younger, but his wife looks like 30 years old. Yeah, and the dude was at least in his 50s in 2001. So
I'm saying, man, they don't mesh at all.
Right,
two different universes.
Yeah, 30-year-old wife. So you do you, man. Then we get this almost like, to me, it's a weird montage, like of him like researching, playing with his kid. I get the moment they're going for, but I felt it was unnecessary. I don't know how you felt about it. Like,
you mean the Rocky montage when he's doing sit-ups and he's
doing like the sit-ups with his kid. He's like in the beach swimming, and then like there's
playing the Rocky theme.
Yeah. And then there's a bunch of them just like sitting there researching. I get it's leading up to him leaving, but then they break the montage twice. One of them is when he's talking to his kid and they're like running, and the kid asks how long he'll be gone, and they're talking about him being put to sleep, and his kid asks like, oh, does this mean you're gonna die? He's like, no, they're gonna wake me up. But then right back to the montage, Yeah. And then he's in bed with his wife, and she's like, I'm trying to be an adult here and understand this, but like, I don't think you should go. Going on this trip won't bring the men back, and you've punished yourself enough for it, which all fair points, to be real, but I think it's that scientist in him of, let's be honest, probably some of it is guilt, but there's that burning desire of like, I just need to know what happened.
Sure.
I need to see it for myself. Like, hearing about it won't be enough. I feel like that'd be a big thing for me, is like, I need to know what's going on up there.
Yeah.
Not someone else tell me what's going on. I need to be there to see what's going on. Yeah,
absolutely.
Yeah. So that's would be my big motivator for going personally. Then we get, this is where it's like all a little jarring for me, because we get all these little weird tiny little montage, and then just boom, we're at Jupiter.
Yeah, I hate that cut.
I did too.
Stuck out to me like a sore thumb.
Yeah, I actually, because they don't even tell you how much time has passed. I actually rewound to see if I missed like a little thing coming up of like how much time passed. They don't tell you. You're just he's just waking up at Jupiter. So it was very, because it wasn't even, the thing is like, I know I'm harking on this montage thing. It wasn't even like a good montage, I think, is my problem. It was very just random shit. Like, clearly he's preparing for the mission and he's hanging out. So I get it, but it just felt, it wasn't. And then just boom, like you said, this transition. It felt
like they either ran out of money or shooting time, and we just got to get to the space shit. So we're just gonna jettison, any script that dealt with the build up to the launch. And it just it felt really spliced together with tape. Like, ugh, that's a horrible cut.
And see, that's the thing, is I feel the same thing could have been accomplished if, instead of this weird montage, have the moment at the launch. You're saying goodbye. You're saying all those things that your kid asked you at the launch before you're leaving. You're saying your goodbyes. Your wife could say, don't go. You don't need to do
show this. Show Floyd getting into the hibernation chamber, for his long sleep, do something.
Yeah. It was so, again, I had to I went back. I was like, wait, what did I miss? But no, it is that. It's just boop. And so, because the thing, I don't know if they were trying to go for a 2001 thing, because we have the jumps, but they were done really well in the first movie. And they had, at least
I don't
explanations.
I don't think Peter Hines was going for that type of cut. I think he
I
knew
don't think
better.
yeah,
I think he knew
no.
better. It's like there's no way I'm ever going to top that, legendary cut to bone to
Oh no,
this
I don't think he
pilot.
was trying to do that. But because even when after disconnecting Hal to Jupiter, at least there was a little like script on the screen letting us know time has
Right.
passed and what's going on.
Yeah.
Because again, this even that might have made it a little better for me, but it was just like, here we are. We have no idea how much time has gone by. And maybe I don't know, maybe I missed it somewhere, but I'm pretty
Nope,
sure
you didn't
not.
miss it. They didn't.
Okay, because I went back and looked. Yeah. Again, suddenly we're on Jupiter and we're on it's called the Leonov.
Leonov. Yeah.
Leonov. It's the Russian ship, right? And I put it here. The film doesn't indicate how much time has passed. Floyd's being woken up from his cryo sleep, hydro sleep. I'm not sure. I think cryo sleep like when you're frozen. He wasn't really frozen, so I don't know what we call it. His deep hibernation.
Hibernate.
Right?
Yeah.
Yeah. We learned they're about 2 days away. So this is where for me, I'll be honest though, I'm cool with this because this is where for me the film started to get good, I'll say, and I was invested, and the things I love about it start to happen. And it's all simple stuff, right? Again, these films, you don't go to these films for the action. You don't go for major conflict. I mean, there's a little, I guess, but not really. You don't go for the battles and all that, but just the wonders of the universe, man. And they're done in such simple ways. But like this part coming up here is, so again, the whole point of this is they're going to see what happened to Discovery, but now something's about to happen that's going to change the entire mission, right? And it's done in such a subtle way, and the slow burn, the grow. I do feel that this director did this sometimes really well. And there's another scene I like a lot that we'll talk about. So Floyd's woken up 2 days early. They're 2 days away from Discovery, but he's like, don't worry, nothing's wrong. But his government asked that we wake him up because they found something near Europa. And that's going to be a major thing, right? Oh, yeah. It's the thing.
It is.
So the crew has discovered chlorophyll on Europa. Now, if I'm remembering correctly, chlorophyll is sort of like algae, right? It's I looked it up. Basically, it's a living organism. So they're like, what the fuck? This shouldn't be here, and Floyd's very confused. They're still being, I should mention, by the way, there is a little tension between the crews. Again, the whole American-Russian thing. Mm-hmm. So they're being kind of standoffish with him, and he's asking questions, trying to understand what's going on. And this is where the commander of the Russian ship is like, hey, man, like, we're telling you this so you know what's going on, but like, you're here to help us with Discovery, so we're under no obligation to tell you more.
Can I also say I really appreciate how they do the hibernation sleep when he comes out of the hibernation chamber. It's more realistic than, like, say, Aliens when they hop out and they're starting to do push-ups and pull-ups and they're eating cornbread. Like, it takes Roy Scheider a while to adjust. He's like, I've been asleep for a year that took to get to Jupiter. And I thought that was really well done and realistic. They probably did a lot of research on that to say, like, how would the body react if you were in this chamber for a year? Like, how would you?
Yeah, he's feeling sick. He mentions feeling almost like hungover.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so, it is done really well. I feel like, and speaking of Aliens, I feel almost like in the first Alien, they kind of do that. But then, in Aliens, when you have the military, it's the military, they're popping out, doing the push-ups, ready to go.
That kind of popped in my head. It's like, oh, that was cool. That was well done. I appreciated that.
Yep, exactly. I do touch on that a little bit when the other Americans wake up, because they, John Lithgow has some funny things that he says. And so, right. So, as they're talking about all this, the commander of the Russian, she's trying to tell him, like, hey, look, like, things are getting worse.
Played by Helen Mirren, of all people.
Yeah.
She was super hot, man.
Yeah, she was a babe in this movie. I don't know if I know her from anything else.
Babe.
What
Back
might
in the 80s,
I know her from?
Excalibur. She was in
okay.
Excalibur.
Like the Excalibur with Sean Connery.
No, Sean Connery wasn't in Excalibur.
What am I thinking of? He was
You're
in one
you're
of the
thinking of
King Arthur
Highlander.
films. Nah, dude, there was one where he played King Arthur, I thought. Am I tripping?
Arthur and Marion, I think it was called, or something like that. Yeah.
Then maybe I haven't seen Excalibur.
Yeah, you should check it out, man. It's pretty cool. It came out in 1981. Anyway, I just wanted to shout out to Helen Mirren real quick. Okay, continue.
Nice. So she's trying to tell him what's going on Earth, and Floyd is very much just ignoring it and asking questions, right, about what they found. And they're essentially kind of talking over each other, and he's purposely ignoring her. And he finally just cuts in. It's like, just because our government are behaving like asses doesn't mean we have to. We're scientists, not politicians. Mm-hmm. So he cuts back with, how fast is it moving? And he's like, we're told 1 meter per minute, right? Then he's talking about the chlorophyll. So, and they let him know that they plan to send a probe down there to check it out and kind of confirm their findings. So we see quick little scene of they send this probe down. They get to the surface, and just as they confirm chlorophyll, this energy burst shoots off, destroying the probe, and shoots off towards Jupiter, right? And so it erases all the data that they just collected, right? And
what shoots that energy projectile? What is it that shot that? Was it the monolith?
So we're not supposed to know, right? We're pretty sure it's the monolith, right? At this moment in time, we don't know. And so, because in the very next scene, they're talking about what just happened. They think it was just the Russians are like, oh, this is just
static buildup. Yeah,
exactly, right. And convinced there's life down there, they want to send another one, but they're worried it's going to happen again. But this is where Floyd comes in, and he's like, "This was a warning, right?" He's like, this was from the monolith, a warning to stay away. And this is when he tells them, like,
shot across the bow.
Yeah, we've been sending probes, both of us, Russians, Americans, since the 70s, never had any issues. And then boom, the monolith appears 9 years later. Just now, we discover life where life has never existed. And as we know as the audience, the monolith, that's kind of their thing. They seek out and help life, right? So Floyd's kind of picking up on this. And so he's telling them very much like, no, this was a warning for us to stay away from Europa. And spoilers, we'll find out he was correct.
Yes.
Yeah.
I know I tend to jump the gun a little bit, Jason. Sorry.
No, you're good. You're good. I love it though. You're on it. You're on it. Yeah. It just means you're already picking up what they're putting down, man.
Sorry.
Yeah. Yep. But yeah, so you're with Floyd. You'd be like, no, dude, this is we shouldn't be fucking.
Can we take a sidetrack real quick to the novel? I remind me, isn't there a scene in the novel that a ship from China is also there, and somebody goes down there and gets.
So you are thinking of the third book.
Third book. Oh, okay.
Yeah, in the third book, it's discovered. So, yeah, quick sidebar, everybody. So in the third, so you are correct with your time with the timelines, but it's not known. So in the third book, we find out that there was an expedition that landed on Europa before all this stuff began, and the life was discovered, but it like crashed on Europa.
Right. That's what it was. Because I was thinking, why did they leave that out? But it wasn't until the third book that we find out that happened.
Exactly. Yeah. Okay. So it's like it happened before the events of the end of this movie. And it is a really cool. I actually love the third book so much, and it's a bummer there's not a movie we can talk about on the podcast of the third book. But the third's one of my favorites. I think it was. Yeah,
I enjoyed all of them.
Yep.
But that scene just kind of, I just thought about that real quick. But yeah.
Yeah.
Sorry
so
I go on tangents, Jason. I'm sorry, man. You
That's
invited me on your
okay.
show. You know what to expect. I go on these
Yeah.
tangents where, like, you know what? Can we put the brakes on and talk about something else real quick?
Yeah. Tangent away, man. Yeah, no. So that happens in the third, but your timeline's correct. It's just
Okay.
we don't technically know about it yet.
Right.
Yeah. Okay. So that's kind of the end of that for now, right? And now they're approaching Jupiter. They're closer. Wait,
I also let me
wait.
put the brakes on real quick.
Yeah.
They did a really good job with Jupiter. Like, I guess it was one of the very first, not the first, but computer generated images for a movie. Like, that looks really good. Like, they did a good job with the effects.
Yep.
Yeah.
I had notes for that, Eric. Okay. No. Just kidding, man. But you're right. It looks really good. Yeah.
Yeah, it looks awesome.
Yeah. What Eric said. But yes, because there's a really cool shot later where I really noticed it. And I'll kind of touch on it when we get to it. But yeah, Jupiter looks great. And actually, I was reading somewhere that it said that this movie even had a little bit better accuracy than 2001 with depictions, which is fair because again, we're talking 20 years of development and learning, right? So, but I remember Jupiter looking pretty good in the first one too. I can't remember a side-to-side comparison, but right.
Well, yeah, I know like Earth didn't look the hottest in 2001.
I don't remember.
Yeah. Well, I don't think they had like the photos they had eventually when they went to the moon, but by 1984, there had been, I think there was Voyager who went by Jupiter by that time. So they had some photos for references and stuff. So they used that, the computer, wizards used all that to create a really cool looking Jupiter for this film.
Yeah. Speaking of Jupiter, we're going to get to this scene where I think what they're doing is they're slingshotting themselves around it or around Io they're getting themselves locked into its orbit, right? Because and this part was interesting to me. So this is where we get another one of those voiceovers, but it doesn't matter. But as they're approaching it, basically what's happening is they're all nervous because they very well could die here if things don't go well, right? They could burn up in the atmosphere or something. And so Lloyd mentions in his voiceover that everyone else had things to keep them busy with work and all he had was time to think about it. But what made me kind of laugh about this part, and again, Lloyd's in his room. No, it is Floyd. No, wait. Yeah, Floyd. My God. Floyd is sitting in his bed chamber, I guess is what it is. I shouldn't say a room, like his little bed, right?
Yeah.
That's up on a wall. It actually looks really cool and comfy. I'm not gonna lie. So he's sitting there as they're doing this trajectory and getting nervous, and then just kind of out of nowhere, one of this crew member kind of just opens up his pod and kind of looks at him, and then like sits in with him.
I know. I was like, wait a second, what kind of movie are we watching? What's going to happen?
But yeah, and I kind of got, and they're kind of holding each other tight, and you could tell she's scared. And he asked her if she speaks English, and she says no English. So I got the impression that like she was afraid, didn't want to die alone. But the part for me was like, why is she choosing this American stranger? That has no rapport.
It is kind of random. She just
it was very random. I don't.
Cool if I cuddle with you real quick.
Yeah, like I don't remember what the book says on it, if anything. It's been a while since I've read it, but because this character has the only dialogue. This character shows up a lot in the movie, but it's definitely a background character, and the only dialogue in the movie is no English. That's all they say. So it felt very an interesting choice. I think I understood what they were going for. Again, that like not wanting to die alone if things went bad.
I think it was that we can put aside our differences, U.S. and Russia, and cuddle together as nations.
Let's all cuddle, everybody. That's the moral of the story. We should all be cuddling.
In the face of danger, let's just cuddle, and we'll get through it.
So, anyways, at any rate, they're okay. They make it. They get
do.
into orbit.
What do you think
She
about
leaves.
that scene with the fiery Linoff
I thought it looked great.
going around Jupiter like a fireball? I thought they did a pretty good job for the time.
So they were going around Jupiter.
They were using it to brake. They wanted to air. It was like an air brake maneuver.
Is that what they were doing? Oh, okay.
And they needed to slow down so they could approach the Discovery because the Discovery was in orbit,
of Io.
So they had to slow down. So they did this air brake thing, and I don't know if they really explained it too well or whatever.
Well, again, it was the voiceovers, just real quick and like, this is what we're doing now.
Yeah.
And so he did explain it. It's just I didn't go back to listen to the voiceover. But I thought it looked great. It looked really cool. What are your thoughts?
I mean, for 84, I mean, not too bad, not too shabby.
Yeah, absolutely. So at any rate, they're okay. She leaves and she gives them a nice little kiss on the cheek. So there we go. Go Floyd, him and those young women. So then we hear that famous line again, my God, it's full of stars. And Floyd is sitting at a computer, which is showing sort of a 3D model of the monolith and a photo of David Bowman. So I took away that he's just sort of looking over the last transmission of David. And then he's called to the medical bay. And this is where we finally see the other two Americans are awake. So Chandra, who we met in his office. And now we get the first look at Kurnow, who is played by John Lithgow. So
I like
Floyd,
both these actors. I like Bob Balaban too. He was in Close Encounters of the Third Kind.
That's where I recognize him from.
He always kind of plays that same kind of character, like the smart scientist or the guy who knows everything. But he always has the same kind of calm demeanor. He was also in Altered States. He's one of my favorite character actors from the late 70s, early 80s. And I know he's been in some more recent stuff. He shows up every now and then. Oh, there he is, Bob Balaban from Close Encounters.
Nice. Yeah. Okay. I knew he was familiar. And once you said that, that's a movie I plan to talk about someday on here.
Oh man, that movie is classic. So good.
Yep. So he's awake, and this is just a quick little recap. Floyd catches him up to date on the blockade back at home. And the tension is kind of caused on the ships. And then he also tells them like, ooh, something happened on Europa, but we can't talk here. But we as the audience know he's talking about the life forms they found, right? And now we see Discovery for the first time. And it's kind of doing a big old loop-de-loop, right? It's spinning. And so they can't actually dock with it safely because of this. So they have to do a spacewalk over to it because it's too dangerous to dock. This scene coming up, I really, really liked.
This scene it's the best scene in the movie. In my opinion, this is it, man.
Yep. I think I would agree. We'll see if I change my mind as we go along and I remember things. But so Kurnow has to go with Max is like the only name I was able to remember from the Soviet crew. And there's a lot of cool things I have to say about Max and Kurnow when we get there that I really enjoyed from this movie. But Kurnow's obviously very nervous, and he's explaining like, dude, I'm not an astronaut. I'm just an engineer. But he has to go because he's the one that can turn Discovery back on. And that way he can stabilize it so everyone else can get over there. Right. And I don't remember exactly what not Kurnow, but Max, like, his job title is, but he's the one that goes with him on the spacewalk. And so, here's where I say, like, this scene for me was a reminder why I love these films. This scene is very reminiscent of when David had to shut down HAL. Minimal music. There is some. I wish there wasn't any, but 84, sure, I get it.
Right.
But we hear that helmet breathing again from Kurnow, right? Because he's very nervous, he's very breathing. So, I wrote like, there's no major action, no big space wars, but the suspense builds so much just that this dude's fear, he's floating freely out in space. And all you can hear is the breathing of his helmet, and
Jupiter is right below him. So
right there.
If you have a fear of heights, like, this scene's going to get to you.
So I don't think it's Jupiter because remember they're at Io right now.
Oh, is it Io? Well,
Yeah.
yeah.
So because they're orbiting the moon. Yeah. And but yeah, same thing. It's right below him,
Mhm.
right? And he's just panicking. Floyd's trying to calm him down, distracting him with jokes.
Right.
And this is when Kerno asks Max, how do you say chicken in Russian? And so they're, he kind of tells him, so he's distracted himself. Again, a lot of heavy breathing and all that. And he starts to hyperventilate, and he's like, oh, I can't breathe. But Max actually kind of talks him down. And this was really cool because it's starting to show the bond of the two crews for the first time, because there's been this uneasy tension the whole time. And it's almost like through Max and Kernow, like this friendship we see start to grow.
Yeah.
And I really liked that because it's like out here orbit, you're floating freely above Io. Who gives a shit about the petty squirrels of governments?
Yeah.
It's just two dudes and their bond. It's really cool. And like they do develop this friendship as time goes on in this movie. And I really liked that kind of touch.
Yeah. Yeah. I agree. Like that, the actor who plays Max Bralinsky, I always get him confused. So there was this comedian named Yakov Smirnov, and he did like this skit where he's like, what a country, like he was this Russian immigrant and he'd come over to America and he gets to experience all these American things. And his tagline was, what a country. He looks just like this actor who plays Max. So I thought it was Yakov Smirnov, but checking the cast list, I'm like, no, it wasn't him. So anyway, okay. But yeah, I like their interactions with each other, and they have a good chemistry. And Lithgow, I mean, that guy, he's a great actor. And he does a great job at portraying panic. He has this voice where you believe that he's actually freaking the fuck out, right? So yeah, it's good.
Well, and funny enough too, I don't know if a fun fact about this is he was actually afraid of heights. And so I heard that really, it actually made this part challenging for him. So I'm sure some of that bled into everything else. Right. Sure. So they get inside, right? They have to manually open the pod bay doors. Oh shit. We get our first glimpse at Hal, and I love it because it's real quick. It's real subtle, but it's just, there he is. We see it on the dashboard of the computers, and Lithgow makes a quick nod of, oh, there's Hal, and Floyd's like, how does he look? And then he's just like asleep, right? And that's it for now. So Max wants to test the atmosphere in here and see how all that is, but they detect that it's like 100 below, and
hella
so like
cold.
Cold as fuck. So they're like, all right, well, turn up his heat on his suit. He takes his visor off, and he's sniffing and breathing. And he's like, all right, I can breathe. There's oxygen, but it's too cold to work, right? And then he's like, oh, there's this strange sort of smell, stale and rotten. And this is where he freaks out. He puts his helmet back on, and now he starts to panic because he's sort of like, oh shit, there's a dead body.
Yeah.
Right. Like, so they're assured him like, no, there can't be any dead body. Like David ejected the scientist. Frank was lost in space, and we don't know where Bowen is.
They say it's just like rotted food from the galley or something.
Yeah, because he's like, well, what if Bowen came back and we don't know? So I think he's just kind of freaking out that there might be like a dead body in there. But Floyd's like, no, it didn't happen. Like it's got to be like spoiled meat or something, right? So then they laugh again. Yeah, this is where I wrote, because this is where you really kind of start to see it. Like I like the dynamic of these characters, right? It showed the tension starting to fade because it really does. Like after this, all the crew is kind of a little more chill. They start working together a little better. And so I just really liked that touch. So Kernow, I don't know how to say it. Kernow,
man. Let's just go with Kernow.
It sounds, I don't like that name, but Kernow gets the power restored partially, they say, but they're now able to dock the rest of the crew to Discovery. And so I might cut this. Yeah. Oh, yeah. So I'm gonna cut that. It doesn't matter. This is where I finally mentioned the voice memo stuff of how redundant it was. But
Yeah.
we've already talked about that, so I'll just cut that. Yeah.
Okay.
So now Chandra kind of takes over for a while as far as the attention of the film, and we see him back in sort of the main brain room, if you will, where David deactivated Hal in the original. And this part was really cool, really well done. And these are the moments, Eric, that make me actually really like this movie. For again, maybe not a perfect movie, but it's like little moments like this just bring that excitement of all these stories for me, and where I think they did a good job and really shined, because we get this really cool moment of Chandra trying to fix Hal, sort of bring him back to life, if you will. He's inputting some commands, and when Hal reads it back, it sounds almost like one of those toys you have as a kid, that where you would like type in something and it'd read it back all robotic at you, and sound awful. And it's doing that for a while, getting high pitch, starts moving really fast, and he's moving some controls around and fixing things, and then boom, suddenly there it is. Good morning, Dr. Chandra. This is Hal. I'm ready for my first lesson.
The perfect way to play it, because we're all familiar with Hal's voice.
Exactly.
Right? So it is this buildup of, okay, we're going to run through a couple of different like voices, like sped up and garbly-gook, and we're all expecting, I can't wait to hear that voice. I can't wait to hear that voice. And then it happens. You're like, yes.
Yep. And it was so good. And it was chilling, because it's like, oh shit, okay, he's back, And that's the thing too. And it showed, what I took from it too is he didn't write sentences, just words, right? Good morning, breakfast, tomorrow, yesterday.
Yeah.
And Hal's just reading them as written, but then suddenly, once he's Hal, he's forming his own sentence.
Yeah,
he's not just reading the prompts, I just thought that was really good.
They did a cool job recreating that, like you said, you called it the main brain, where the inside of Hal, where all those like chips are, and then you have Dr. Chandra, kind of floating down, the way that Bowman did in the first movie. They did a pretty good job of recreating that whole environment.
Absolutely. If I remember, I think Stanley had all props destroyed from 2001.
That's what I heard.
So they literally had to rebuild all this from just like looking at the first movie and maybe like blueprints and stuff.
He had to destroy it after they faked the moon landing, Jason. That's why they didn't want any evidence.
Right. Yep, that's right. You're right. So now we get a scene though where Floyd is with Kurnow, and he basically has this doomsday device for Hal, if you will, and he wants him to install it when Chandra's asleep. Don't let him know about it. And he's got this little red calculator that he can put prompts into, and this is because they don't trust Hal, right? They're like,
I wouldn't trust him either.
Yeah, fair, straight up. So they're like, if Hal tries any funny business, we got this thing to immediately deactivate him, right?
Yeah, it's like a pocket calculator.
Yeah, so it's a pocket calculator, and they put in like 999 and something else I forgot, and that will deactivate Hal if needed. So he tells him, install this, when Chandra's asleep, so he doesn't know about it, because obviously Chandra wouldn't let them do it if he knew. And now we finally get our first shot of the monolith as the two ships are getting closer to it. The big old monolith just floating in the sky. The Soviets ask if Hal had any additional information on the monolith that they could use. But Floyd tells them that he was disconnected before it was found. Bowman took the secrets with him. So any new things they found, but that went down with Bowman. But they talk about its proportions: 1 by 4 by 9. They are perfect even when for 6 decimal places. This is where Floyd says the small one on the moon was the same, 1 by 4 by 9. They've tried to find if it had any cosmic purpose at all. They couldn't really find anything. and this is where the commander of the Soviets say she wants to send a pod, a human pod, a pod with a human, whatever, to check out the monolith. Floyd advises against it, but she wants to send Max, and Max really wants to go. Now, us as the audience, we remember what happens when David tried this, right?
Yeah, man, don't do it.
Yeah. So, but Max is excited. He wants to do it. And this again shows that friendship between Kurnow and Max. He's down with them as he's getting into the pod, and this is where too I forgot to mention they're sharing, like, they're teaching each other their language or their slang, because
easy as cake or easy as pie, or they kept
Max
that phrase.
Yeah, so Max keeps saying easy as cake, and Kurnow keeps correcting him about easy as pie, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it's just just more showing that dynamic between them, and it's really cool, really well done, I thought. So here's
it's really the only relationship we invest in this movie, because
it really is.
Between Floyd and his wife, there is hardly any time spent with that.
Yeah.
And then between him and the Russians or Helen Mirren, there's no love interest there. So
besides the cuddle fest,
there is that cuddle fest, which I'm invested there. Like, come on. But no, between Lithgow and that other character, like, we are invested in that relationship. So you're absolutely right on that.
Yep. And like, there's a moment later in the film where the commander of the Soviet and Floyd kind of have a moment, but again, this is the one that felt the most natural,
for sure.
And just really worked for me, because again, we talked about that cuddle scene and it was very not natural. It was just like I understood it, like at least I think I understand it, of like, they think she doesn't want to be alone in case something happens, sure, but I guess picking Floyd was the interesting part for me. But anyways, we said enough on that, right? So this is where my notes of Jupiter come in, right? We get this great shot of Max out in the pod, Jupiter huge in the background, looks amazing. Because here was the other thing too, right? Mentioned with the special effects, this Jupiter's moving, so we see the clouds moving and stuff.
Right.
We don't get that in 2001, so we got the Jupiter in the background, looks fantastic. The monolith looking huge and black.
Man, can you imagine seeing this on an IMAX screen? That would have been fucking awesome.
I did get to see 2001 in theaters, like they brought it, like how they bring old movies back. So that was really cool, but not on IMAX. That would be really cool though.
Yeah.
And this is where I say, like, so here we see Max flying up to the monolith. I'm like, we all know what happened to David. So I imagine the audience was definitely in suspense when seeing this, right? Mm-hmm. For the most part, things seem okay though. He's driving around. He's looking at it. They tell him to do a parameter over the top, right? To fly over the top, see what can happen. And this is where we see it now. The monolith kind of wakes up. It starts to almost like rev up. Makes me think of like a Death Star revving up its laser shot, and then it does another burst, the same burst from Europa, right? Mind you, out into space, and this launches the pod with Max. Now, I don't know if unfortunately Max is just dead, or was he sucked off into somewhere else like David was in the first one. We never know. We never hear from Max again. Right. But I'm like, because we don't see what happens to David in the first one, right?
Right.
Suddenly he's just in the Stargate.
I think that the monolith turned Max into another star baby. So now there's two star babies.
I want to believe that, because so far the monolith has not been malicious, right?
I like that instead of having the monolith be a weapon, like you said, like the Death Star. I don't want the monolith shooting lasers at people.
I don't either. So I'm choosing to believe Max is okay.
Yes.
He's in his own human zoo, going through the same thing David went through. So Max is alive out there, everybody.
Yay.
Don't worry. that's how we're telling it.
But everybody thinks he's dead back on the ship.
Yep. Now we get to one of my favorite scenes. It's not much, I don't know, just these kind of things I just love, and it was done so well, and it's chilling, and just so we're on Earth all of a sudden, right?
Yeah.
In this woman's house. We don't know who it is yet. And she's watching the news, and the TV kind of begins to flicker. And suddenly David Bowman appears on the screen, and he says, "Hello, Betty." In a much more chilling voice than I just did. But we find out that this is David Bowman's wife, right? And she's like, "David, is that you?" And this is just what I love, because he's like, "I'm not sure. I remember David Bowman and everything about him." And this is where Betty says, "Well, Dave is dead." Where he, this, whatever this is, right, says, all that Bowman was is still a part of me. Right. And so Betty's like, "Well, why are you here?" He's like, "I don't know. I think I wanted to say goodbye." And I just love this, because it's David, but it's not, because David has transcended to this new being, and he continues. He's like, "I don't know why I'm here. I think I wanted to say goodbye." And he's talking to her like, "Oh, you're married again. Is he a good man? I'm glad. I love you. Goodbye, Betty." And she asked him not to go. She's like, "I don't understand." And this is where we get the first, like, one of my favorite things from the movie, right? He's just like, something is going to happen. I wanted to say goodbye. And when she asks what's going to happen, all he says is something wonderful. And I love this, because it's chilling, but a good thing's coming. And it's I don't know. And it's just, I don't know why it works for me, but it works for me, man.
Do you like when he's combing his grandma's hair?
I don't like that part, but we'll get to that. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. I get what they were going for, but that scene, yeah. So something wonderful, right? And now we're back to the ship. So this is where we get that moment with Floyd and the captain. He offers her a drink, and she's like, because they all think Max is dead, so she's obviously upset, because she's now kind of feeling how Floyd's felt, like, "Oh, I sent Max out there. This is on me." He offers her a drink. She kind of makes a comment of like, "There's not supposed to be alcohol here. Like, I could, she's being snarky, of course, but." And they have sort of a back and forth where she's like, "You think I was wrong to send Max?" And Floyd's initial response was just, "It doesn't matter what I think," and she's like, "But you think I was wrong?" And he just replies, "Yep." They make small talk. They talk about his wife, his kid. So we find out here he actually remarried, right? So this current wife is a new wife. He has a 17-year-old daughter, and then he has the son he has now with his current wife, and she's married with a daughter. So they joke about like, "Oh, we should have them meet," So we get a little bonding here. Again, not as organic.
Yeah,
I felt as with the other gentlemen, but it's cool. We're seeing the crew coming together, right? And that's the underlining theme of the film, right?
There's
like,
another
obviously,
missed opportunity here, though, Jason.
What's that?
So the first movie, when Haywood calls to talk to his kid, the daughter, who was played by Kubrick's young daughter, they should have done that scene again, but with the 17-year-old daughter and Haywood talking to her through the video phone, to show the, how they connect, whatever. Like, I don't know. I thought it would have been cool to do that, but they didn't.
Yeah, I guess it's just
like we don't even see the 17-year-old daughter,
right? Oh, yeah, because it would have been her. Oh, dude, I didn't even make that connection. Duh, it's the daughter from the first one.
Yeah. So I wish they would have.
That could have been cool if they would have had Kubrick's daughter come back too.
Would have been cool, man.
Yeah. I feel like it's more just like, I get why they didn't though, because in the first one it was like, "Oh my God, video calls from space. Wow." This one, it's like, we didn't need it, but I think it would have been just a cool little if they would have brought back Kubrick's
It
daughter,
would have
that
been
would
a
have been
cool callback to the original, a little homage
Yeah.
to, hey, remember that scene in 2001 when he talked to his
Yeah.
young kid and now she's 17? But
That's another cool thing they could have done instead of the weird montage.
they could have. I wish
Yeah.
they would have asked me before they filmed this movie. I would have given them all kinds of good advice, Jason. But I
Well,
was
if
only
we ever-
13.
Yeah, if we ever get a movie for the third book, they better bring us on.
Yes,
Yeah.
they need to.
Yep. Where am I?
Where are we?
Got it. So now Chandra, Floyd, and some of the Russians are in the pod room and they're going to talk to Hal. And Chandra tells him, like, don't talk. Your accents will confuse them. And this is where I think they're like officially really rebooting Hal and seeing what he knows, seeing if things work. And so he asked him if he's ready to continue his work and what his duties are. And this is where Hal kind of reads the Discovery mission. So he still thinks he's on the Discovery mission is what I got from this scene. Right.
Yeah.
Because to his knowledge, the mission hasn't ended yet because he was disconnected. Right. And this is where he asked, he's then asked if he recalls Frank and David leaving the Discovery. Hal says no. This is where he asks who the men in the room are, if the mission's been completed, and he says the line of, I have the greatest enthusiasm for the mission, right? Something he said a lot in the first movie.
Yeah.
Chandra tells him it is over. He did a great job. He tells Hal he wants to have a private conversation with the crew. This is where we get the big bombshell that Eric told us in the beginning of this podcast. This is another part I love too, though, dude. And this all goes to Arthur's writing. You know what I mean? Like the credits Arthur's writing with all this, right? Because this whole time we think that Hal just malfunctioned or that this evil AI robot, right? But we find out he worked with what he had and his conflicting orders, right? Yeah. And this is where Chandra is putting the blame on Floyd when Floyd's like, well, did you ask him why he did what he did? And he's like, yeah, it wasn't his fault. It was yours. He's like, I found the order that was given, that it was chosen. So there was a lot of dialogue here and a lot of big words. And I don't like a lot of big words. So I'm going to try to paraphrase as best I can. And Eric, you can help me out if I miss something.
Okay.
But the short version of it is the orders Hal was given it was decided Frank and Poole, the commander and co-pilot, would not be told of the true intent of the mission. The others were briefed on it before they were put into hibernation. Hal was also given the orders that he would be allowed to finish the mission without humans if needed.
Mm-hmm.
So he was put in this pickle. Oh, and he was programmed to never lie, but he was told by, quote, Floyd, go ahead and lie. So now Hal, lie if needed to preserve the secrets of the mission. So now Hal is programmed to not lie, but he's told to lie. And Frank and David aren't allowed to know. And he basically he got confused. He got paranoid. His solution to complete the mission he was programmed to complete, he saw no other way. Right.
Mm-hmm.
And this is where Floyd is like, I didn't fucking tell him that, and this is where, it came from the NCA. And then this is where we find out, the White House did this. So the White House went above Floyd, gave these prompts to Hal, which essentially, so we find out, and it's kind of cool. And I love this. It's like, yeah, Hal wasn't this evil AI robot, like the cliche, like, ooh, the evil. It's just like he was pretty much put up against a wall with all these different. Exactly. It's sort of like you corner a kid and you're telling them one parent saying do this, another saying do that. You got the friend over here poking them, and they sort of just panic, right? And try to I don't know. Did I miss anything? Because I know a lot was said in this moment.
And the funny thing is, I kind of pieced that together even from the first film. Of how Hal's programming was in conflict with what the Security Council was telling Hal to do, as opposed to what the crew was telling it to do. So it was like like I said during our 2001 discussion, it was like he had schizophrenia. He didn't know he was having a breakdown because all these two conflicting orders was like fried his brain.
Right.
So I kind of already pieced it together, but this really solidifies everything. It kind of tells you exactly what happened to Hal. So Hal is not evil. Turns out he's a good computer. He's not a bad computer.
Yep.
He's not out to kill people.
Yeah, exactly. So now this is where we cut back to the Earth, and we get the mother scene, which, I didn't care for it. I knew
the floating brush in the hair didn't work, man. Didn't work.
I appreciate what they were going for, but knowing what we know from a upcoming scene that they could manifest David, I wish they would have just done that.
Mm-hmm.
But maybe they wanted to save it for said scene. But it wasn't not so much. So before Eric and I are getting ahead here. So we're in a scene. There's a woman in a hospital bed. We find out this is David's mother, David Bowen's mother. So she's on her deathbed, and suddenly she shoots up. Right, we see from a monitor screen from a nurse who, in every movie, no one's actually paying attention to monitor screens. So she shoots up, and we see this brush start to float in the air, and suddenly it starts combing her hair, and then we hear like in movies, the heart monitor flatlines, and the nurse runs in there, and the woman's dead with this big grin on her face. I understood what the scene was supposed to be. This entity that is David visiting his mother one more time. She's dying happy because she saw her son again. But it didn't land how it should have.
Really. Nah.
Because one, she looks scary as hell with that smile. It wasn't peaceful. It wasn't beautiful. It looked like someone died from the Joker fucking gas, So it was creepy. And then, the floating brush. So I understand what the scene was meant to be, but I don't think it worked for me.
No, but it was cool to see Cara Dula reprise his role. That dude didn't really age at all, man.
Let's wait.
He looks good.
I got notes on that. So when we were talking about CGI earlier, and I was like, I got things to say. We're going to talk about that.
Okay.
There's things I want to say to Hollywood out there. But right. So now we're back on the ship. So all these scenes with David, right? Because so far he's visited his wife, his mom. It's all leading to something, right? Whatever this entity is of David, something's coming, and we'll find out. Don't worry.
We'll get there.
So back on the ship. So this is where shit kind of gets real for a little bit. Back on the ship, the crew is asked to go to the ward room, and there's a broadcast. So we see that gentleman from the beginning again, the Russian who visited Floyd.
Yeah.
He's on one of the screens, and then the new NCA guy, never got his name, sorry. He's on one. So one's talking in Russian, one's talking in English, but they're basically telling them that missiles have now been launched on Earth, and essentially America and Russia are in a full-on war. So,
which is taking place in Central America, or Honduras or somewhere. There's having
that's it. Yeah, I knew there's some with Central America. Hey, my sister lives in Honduras right now.
Oh,
so random
shout out Honduras.
Shout out. So they're now in a state of war exists, right? A state of war exists between the two. So because of this, Americans cannot be on Russian territory. Russians cannot be on American territory. So basically what's happening now is it is affecting their mission here, and they're telling them that the Russians are not allowed on Discovery, and the Americans cannot be on the Russian ship, and they have to leave immediately. So the 3 Americans are sent to Discovery, and they're told there's going to be a rescue crew that's going to come for them or something. I believe, because obviously the Discovery can't make it back to Earth, right? Yeah. So this order is effective immediately. And there is the thing of in a dire stress emergency, the two can communicate. Otherwise, they are not allowed to communicate. So that's happened. Oh shit. Now we get another cool scene. There's just some simple things in these Space Odyssey films that I just love. So Floyd is sitting alone, getting data from Hal. Not really important. Hal asks if he'd like to play some chess. Floyd declines, and then just without skipping a beat, Hal's just like, hey, I have a message for you from an unknown source. And it's just cool. No build up, no suspense. It's just like, to me, it adds the suspense. I don't know how to explain it really well, but these scenes kind of just the same kind of scene in the first one where the antenna starts to malfunction. It's just out of nowhere, unexpected. There's no music building it up, and now we're just thrown into this intense scene. So Hal tells Floyd, hey, I have a message for you, unknown source. Do you want to hear it? And he's like, sure. All the message is it's too dangerous to remain here. You must leave within 2 days. Floyd is obviously confused, right? And even Hal's like, yeah, I don't know, dude. Don't know what to tell you. Like, I don't get it.
I wish Hal would have said that. Yeah, dude, I don't know, dude.
I don't know, man. It's basically. And so when so Floyd, like, who recorded this? And Hal's like, it wasn't a recording. I don't know where it's coming from. So Floyd's like, we don't have the fuel, bro. Like, sorry. And another message comes in like, I'm aware, but nonetheless, you must leave. Floyd's like, he's like, well, I'm not gonna take this seriously if I don't know who I'm talking to. And this is where it gets chilling, right? Because the response is, I was, and this is what I love. It's like, I was. So who is this now, right? Because again, it's transcended, but I was David Bowman, right? Floyd doesn't respond. Hal asks if he should repeat the message. So he thinks it's Kernown. And he's like, I don't have time for your jokes. But Hal assures him it's not Kernow. And the next message is, it's important that you believe me, so look behind you, right? So this is Floyd turns around slowly. Boom. There's David Bowman just standing right there in front of him. Same suit that he left in the Discovery when he went out to the pod. And he kind of walks off to the pod room, and David follows him in there. When we get in there, he's now manifested into an older version of himself in the black robes we see from the ending of 2001 in that whole montage scene, right? As he gets older. So, and he says, I've been allowed to give you this warning. You must leave here in 2 days. And this is where Floyd says, allowed by who? Right. And now he's kind of flip-flopping back and forth from younger, older versions of himself. But David, he's now his younger self again. He says he can't explain. But we see him reach out his hand to Hal's eyeball, if you will, right? And now he's really old, David, from the bed, right? Mm-hmm. And he says, something is going to happen. You must leave. And when he's asked what, he just says something wonderful, right?
Again, yeah.
Yep. And he's like, I understand how you feel. It's all very clear to me now, the whole thing. It's wonderful. Goodbye, Floyd. We will have no further contact. You have 2 days. And he's young David again. Then we randomly get the fucking Star Child just floating there. And then it's gone. So, I still to this day don't know what the fucking Star Child is. No matter how many videos I've watched, no matter how many things.
Nobody knows. It's never been answered. I don't know
like,
either.
I don't get it. Does Arthur C. Clarke get it? Someone tell me.
No, man.
I don't. I want to understand it. I don't. What is this baby? Yeah.
And that scene that you just described really works because even though Hal has been acquitted of all charges, right? Like, you're still uneasy because we're used to that voice being malevolent, right? And so when he's like, look behind you, I'm like, oh shit, what is Hal gonna fuck him up? Right? Like we're expecting something bad to happen. And they play it like the director Peter Hyams plays it perfectly because he knows how we feel about Hal. He knows in the back of our mind we're all wondering, is Hal gonna freak the fuck out again? What's
we're waiting for it. Yeah.
But
and there's even a scene coming up soon where we're really waiting for it. Yeah.
So very cool scene when Bowman shows back up. So yeah.
Exactly. Yeah, I love that scene.
Yeah.
So yeah, Star Child, don't know. I don't know. He's gone.
We'll never know.
Yeah. And he says, if things go well, there will be another message. And that's the last thing you hear. So now Floyd messages over to the Leonov. I'll get it right one of these times. And basically he's like, I'm coming over to talk to you. You can arrest me if you want, suck it. So he basically talked to the captains like, we need to leave in 2 days. I can't tell you how I know this. You wouldn't believe me. I wouldn't believe me, but we need to fucking leave. And this is where
the hell out of here.
Basically both of them were like, we neither has the fuel. And this is where it's sort of like, well, they're like, we could do this together. The Discovery has enough fuel for the launch, and the Leonov has enough to make it home. So basically their idea is they're going to use the Discovery basically as a booster to launch them into trajectory home, right? And then they'll get home the rest of the way. But now during this conversation, they're kind of going back and forth because she's obviously like, oh, dude, I got my orders. Like, I don't fucking know. Like, you're saying weird shit again. I don't know, man. And they look out, and the giant fucking monolith is just gone. So they're like, cool. That's not concerning at all. But then immediately next scene, the two ships are docking together because I think both of them were just like, yeah, you know what? Maybe we shouldn't hang out here. Like something's going on. We don't understand.
Got a bad feeling about this.
Yeah. Now, this is the only really important talkover I think to mention, because now we're getting messages from the NCA gentleman, and he's trying to get responses from Floyd, who's clearly ignoring his messages because he sends a couple and he's like, hey, I don't know what you're up to, but like, you need to get back to me, homie. And this is where he's like, and while you're at it, there's now been a black spot on Jupiter on the dark side, but it should be visible for you in about 4 hours. So like, maybe check that out, So, we now know there's this black spot on Jupiter, but now that I think about it, then again, maybe we didn't need this, because in a little bit, we're going to see that black spot for ourselves, and we could just figure out that there's a black spot. So I take it back. We don't need any voiceover.
No voiceover.
Yeah. Exactly. So now we're talking. So they're sitting with Chandra. This is another kind of cool scene. They're basically like, yo, we need Hal to handle Discovery. And when it gets destroyed, he will also be destroyed in the process. And there's kind of this cool little conversation of, Chandra's like, well, did you consider how Hal feels going to be about it? Because everyone else in the room is still seeing Hal as just a product, a device. Chandra's the only one who's like, he needs to be treated with the respect of any sort of living thing, because he is conscious, So he's like, did you consider how he'd feel? And this is where Floyd's like, are you saying he's going to disobey orders again? Is he going to go AWOL again? Like, do we need to be concerned? And, Chandra kind of snaps back with, well, last time he was given conflicting orders and he did his best to interpretate them. So this has nothing to do with that. He's like, I just loaded all these new programs to Hal for the trek home. And if I dump all those and tell him to do this, he's going to know something's up. He's basically trying to tell them like, Hal's going to be suspicious. And he's just honest. He's like, I don't know how Hal's going to react. I don't know. I just don't know. But they essentially understand like, this is the only way. Right.
Yeah.
And so here's what I want. Okay. So I kind of forgot to talk about this, but so talking about, you mentioned how good Keir looked in this movie, considering it was 20 years later.
Yeah.
So they did do some digital de-aging in him.
Did they?
So here's my thing. This looks really fucking good. Why does de-aging look worse now than 1984? Maybe they only did a little bit and then some's makeup. I don't know exactly how much they did, but it really made me think like, if they could pull that off in 84, he looks like he does in 2001.
You ever see The Irishman, that Martin Scorsese movie that came out a few years back?
Is that with Robert De Niro?
It's with Robert De Niro, Joe Pesci. I haven't watched it yet. Sort of like the last of the gangster movies, The Godfather, Goodfellas. This was Scorsese's last word on the mafia. It has de-aging, so they de-age Robert De Niro and Joe Pesci, and it's uncanny valley all the way, man. It kind of takes you out. You're like, it doesn't really look that good.
I've kind of heard it's bad. Yeah, I've heard that.
Yeah.
Uh,
But then also like on the Mandalorian, where they have a Mark Hamill reprise his Luke Skywalker role from that time period that the Mandalorian takes place when he's in his 30s or something. That looked okay, but the funny thing is there was some dude from the internet who had his own de-aging equipment that he bought online somewhere, did his own version of a de-aged Mark Hamill playing Luke Skywalker, and it looks fucking awesome. So I don't know, man.
I don't know.
Sometimes all the money in the world doesn't give you the desired product. Sometimes it's talent that really matters. So
yeah,
whoever did this de-aging on Kier Dola did a good job.
They did a good job. Yep. So we got Floyd and Kurnow. They're sitting around and it's just funny because they're talking about things they miss, and Kurnow's like, I miss green. So just green.
Which totally makes sense.
Yeah.
When you're in that environment for years, like long years, right? There's in this space ship environment, it's all gray and black and whatever. Like I would miss green too. I love that line.
Absolutely. Yeah. Floyd says, I miss hot dogs, and Kurnow's, with yellow mustard, and they're just reminiscing because they're kind of, they're getting nervous. They don't know what's about to happen, and they don't know if they're going to make it out of it. So, they're just kind of doing that reminiscing together kind of thing. So now we see Chandra sitting with Hal, talking to him, and, he's setting things up for the launch. And, this is where Hal's starting to get confused with what's going on. And, he tells him that Hal will be meeting us. So he lies to Hal. He tells Hal that that Hal's going to be behind and meet up with another crew that's coming. And again, just as he predicted, Hal's kind of like, this doesn't really make sense, bro. And while this is happening, we now see the black spot in Jupiter start to sink into Jupiter, causing this big hole.
Yeah, it looks like a black hole or something. It's like sucking things into it.
Exactly. And Hal lets him know that it's a bunch of tiny little monoliths, about 1.5 million monoliths, and it's increasing
they're multiplying
once every 2 minutes. So this is where Hal this is where we get the scene of, oh shit, is Hal going to go AWOL again? Because Hal is suggesting to abort the countdown so they could study what's happening. And Floyd tells him, don't let that happen. But Hal starts to be persistent, and he thinks they're making the wrong decision and he should stop the countdown. So Hal's kind of starting to push back, and we see Floyd kind of holding on to his little calculator, like
he's got his finger on the button. He's like, I'm gonna kill Hal if he.
Yep. And Hal even makes the comment that your behavior is not being consistent with logic, unless this phenomenon shows danger. And this is where Chandra just decides to be honest with Hal, and he carefully explains the situation, and he tells Hal, like, if we don't leave, everyone on these ships will be destroyed. And he also kind of lets Hal know, like, I'm sorry, but like, you gotta stay behind and you will be destroyed. And we get silence, right? And then Hal is suddenly like, I understand now. So we get this moment again where we think Hal's about to fucking go AWOL, but it shows the truth that Hal is not evil. As soon as he understands,
he says, thanks for telling me the truth. Like,
exactly.
He just wants the truth, man.
Yep, exactly. He's like, thank you for telling me the truth. And he continues on with the countdown. And, we get this really sort of nice moment between the two, sort of father and son. And we get the same question that Sal asked. Hal asked, will I dream? But this time, Chandra just simply replies with, I don't know.
Because he's continuing telling him the truth. Like,
exactly.
No more lies to you, Hal.
Yep.
Like, I don't know if you do or not. Which
exactly.
I really like that exchange between Chandra and Hal.
Me too.
Again, it's another relationship that we sort of are invested in. You know, we already mentioned, John Lithgow having a relationship with the cosmonaut, and Chandra and Hal. Like, you could tell Chandra has feelings for Hal. You know, he is in awe of this technology. And he treats Hal with respect, and it pays off because Hal doesn't kill him.
Yeah, exactly. And on that note, this was a thing from Arthur C. Clarke where he made this decision to sort of have this redemption arc for Hal because he wanted to break the stereotype of like all AI computers being bad or evil, which again, nice touch. And it's one of the things I love of these stories is it's not about that. And actually I touch on that here in a second, because when, so Chandra's going back to the Lenav, and the ship takes off while he's still outside. So he's kind of getting thrashed around. And we see one of the Russians kind of looking out at him, and he helps him in. That's it. That's the scene. No big deal. But I had this thought when this happened. And the thing I love about these movies is any other fucking Hollywood film like this, there'd be that one Russian that would fucking flip the script and be bad and leave the guy out there. And it's like, no, for the country. It wasn't about that. These movies aren't about that, man. And I love that. Like, so again, if the movie you want is an action-packed Star Wars, go see Star Wars. These aren't those movies.
Right.
But there was no moment, not once did any of the crew turn on each other. There was no none of that. It's just,
they all worked together.
Yeah. And how I believe it would be, like,
for sure,
as they keep saying in the movie, like, we're scientists, we're not politicians. They more than anybody I feel would understand how silly,
Yeah.
And so anyway, it's just a little thing I love. So we get this kind of cool scene. Chandra's back on walking with Floyd, and he tosses him the doomsday device. Like he's known all along. So even if Floyd had tried this calculator, he couldn't. He found it. Yeah. And he's like, I knew you would try something like this. So it kind of shows the trust Chandra had in Hal all along. Right.
Very cool.
And I thought that was really cool. And here's another kind of cool touching scene. And here's what comes up. And here's how great this movie can be. Like, you get emotional over a computer, man. And, suddenly we hear David's voice again. And David talks to Hal. And Hal's like, oh, where are you coming from? I can't see you. And he says something like, I'm not sure, but he tells Hal, like, I want you to point the AE-35 antenna. Hey, that's the one from the original movie. Hey. He's like, I want you to point it towards Earth. And Hal tells him, like, well, if I do that, I'll lose contact with the Lenov. And David's like, it's cool, bro. And so he's like, I've overridden it. Like, please put these instructions in. And Hal's like, and you get this nice touching moment. Hal's like, instructions confirmed. It's great to be working with you again, Dave.
I know, it's like old friends.
Exactly.
Reunited.
Yep. And yeah, he's like, there's one final thing for you to transmit to Earth. It's the most important message you've ever sent. Hal says, and this part's fucking cool. This part's cool, man. All comes full circle. Mm-hmm. Hal says, what's going to happen? Dave once again says something wonderful. But then we get the line. Hal says, I'm afraid. But this time, Dave says, don't be. We will be together. And then Hal asks him where. And David just says, where I am now. So Hal is going to be absorbed in whatever consciousness. And this does come back later in the other books. Like David and Hal kind of merge into this same entity. It's really fucking cool. These are great books, everybody. I'm just saying.
Yes, read the books.
But Hal asked David, he's like, where I am now. So I just love that because we get that I'm afraid line again. Mm-hmm. But this time David, because before David doesn't say anything in the first movie, right?
Yeah.
But now David is the one coming to him, assuring him, don't be afraid. We're going to be together. It's just so good, man. It's just so good.
It's very cool.
I fucking love it. Yeah. And this is where we see the crew looks back as they're taking off, and we see Jupiter completely just sink into itself. Gone. Jupiter is gone. And a big burst of light, explosion, basically a fucking supernova, right? But not quite, because supernovas go really far. But they barely escape, and then we see the iconic the final message, right? On the computer screens, we get all these worlds are yours except Europa. Attempt no landing there. Use them together. Use them in peace. Really fucking cool, man.
Yep.
And that's what we get. That's the scene of them flying off, and then we get the final moments of the film. We're showing clips back on Earth. So oh, by the way, everybody, sorry. So what's happening here is Jupiter has turned into a second sun.
Mm-hmm.
So it imploded on itself, and it was reborn as a sun, which is going to give the nourishment essentially needed for this life that has been found on Europa, right? So all these worlds are yours except Europa, because if you remember, what is the main objective of monoliths? They seek out life, potential life, and they help it. They nourish it to grow. So they're basically saying, like, Europa is a new world.
Yeah, don't interfere with our experiment, humans.
Yeah. I don't even know if they see it as experiments, maybe, but it's more just like, don't fuck with this new world. You have no right. You have no business being here, right? And so I love that, right? And so here is actually the final voiceover of the movie, which I did enjoy. I didn't write all of it down, but I wrote the final sort of paragraph of it. Because I felt it was worth reading, and it's also a great way to end the movie. So before I even do it, if you had anything, Eric, I didn't say yet, you want to touch on before I read this thing, let's hear what you got.
Well, I do want to say that Arthur C. Clarke and Stanley Kubrick actually do appear in this film.
Yes, I knew Arthur C. Clarke did. I didn't know.
He appears twice. Arthur C. Clarke is the old man feeding pigeons on the bench during the opening of the film by the White House. That is him. And then also Arthur C. Clarke and Stanley Kubrick appear on the cover of Time magazine as the president and the Soviet premier. Those are nice. If you pay attention, like, oh yeah, there's Stanley Kubrick. So just want to point that out real quick.
Nice.
I also like that this is the redemption arc for Hal. This is, he did kill humans. He did in the first one, right? I mean, his programming was messed up and he got confused, whatever. But I feel like in this movie in 2010, they gave him this redemption arc where he has been cleared. There's a reason why he did what he did, but he still has to pay, man. Like, you still did some shit. And so he sacrifices himself to save the crew, and he stays behind. And so I thought that was a nice touch, where Hal has to die. He has to. But yeah.
But remember, he doesn't die.
He doesn't die. But they haven't made the third film. So unless you're reading the novels, man, you don't know.
Well, we do, though, because Dave says he's going to be with him where he is now, right? So we do know.
I mean, you could take that a lot of ways. Like, is Dave in heaven? I don't know. Like, you're going to die, Hal, and go to heaven with
David. Doesn't even know where he is. He's like, oh, yeah. No, for real, though. I'm with you 100%. I love sort of the arc with Hal. It was really well done.
Yeah.
So we get our final lines of the film. All the while, they're showing shots around the world, showing two suns in the night sky. So Floyd says a lot of shit here, but I'm just going to read the last part of it, where he says, "Your children will be born into a world with two suns. They will never know a sky without them. You can tell them you remember when there was a pitch black sky with no bright star and people feared the night. You can tell them that when we were alone, we couldn't point to the light and say, there is life out there. Someday the children of the new sun will meet the children of the old. I think they will be our friends. You can tell the children of the day when everyone looked up and realized that we are only tenants of this world. We have been given a new lease and warning from the landlord."
That's
so
an
that's
awesome ending, and
awesome ending.
I have to think that Arthur C. Clarke wrote that shit.
Oh yeah.
That's very poetic.
Oh yeah, and an even little fun fact I had here is the final message was one of Arthur C. Clarke's favorite ideas. He believed that if we ever discovered extraterrestrial life, it might exist in forms we are not meant to interfere with, right? Which absolutely. And then so the final shot the final shot's so fucking good. And there are parts of this movie I do love, man. That's why I say I love this movie.
Well,
Like, not every
a bad movie.
Oh man, but some of the parts when they hit hard for me, they hit hard. Like this final scene. So we go to Europa, we see it as the frozen world we know it as now, but then we get this sort of time lapse where the ice melts, and now we have trees and bushes and this lush forest, and it pans over, and we see this monolith just sitting in the water, and then boom, the 2001 space music starts again, and that's the end of the, and that's it. That's the end of the movie.
Pretty
such a good
awesome ending. Yes,
so good. Yeah. So it's almost like the parts that hit hard for me, they hit hard enough that it's enough for me to be like, yeah, I love this. And again,
sure,
being a lover of the book, they're just such good stories.
I think we had more good to say than bad during our conversation about this movie.
Absolutely.
It has flaws, like every movie has.
Of course.
Some worse than others, but overall, man, like
there's one movie I think doesn't have flaws. And it will be a movie I'll touch on this podcast. Dawn of the Planet of the Apes.
Okay. The flawless film.
To me, it is a 10-10. No one will ever convince me otherwise.
All right.
But that's a podcast for another day, everybody.
Yes, it is.
All right. It's time for Gonna Have Me Some Fun.
I'm gonna have me some fun. I'm gonna have me some fun. I'm gonna have me some fun. I'm gonna have me some fun. I'm gonna have me some fun.
All right, everybody. As we've been saying, this is based on the 2010 Odyssey 2 sequel by Arthur C. Clarke. So we are just going to look at a couple comparisons from the book to the movie and how they were played out a little different, right? So let's jump into that, and then we'll get into our science fact versus science fiction. So number one, we'll talk about the cold tensions. Okay, so that is greatly expanded upon in the movie. So in the book version, in 2010, Odyssey 2, while there is political tension between the U.S. and the Soviet Union, it's not the central driving force of the story. The mission to Jupiter is presented as more of a cooperative scientific endeavor with only mild friction between the American and Soviet crew members. Arthur C. Clarke was a strong advocate of international cooperation in space exploration, so he greatly downplayed the Cold War aspect in favor of focusing on the scientific and cosmic mysteries, which, fair. Mm-hmm. Right. And as we know, the film version dramatically increases the Cold War conflict, making it a central theme. The tension between the two superpowers is constantly referenced, and by the time the Leonov reaches Jupiter, war is nearly breaking out on Earth. The Americans on the ship are even ordered to cut off communication with the Soviets, leading to some emotional confrontations, right, as we saw. So why the change, right? Well, as Eric told us earlier, the movie was released in 1984 at the height of the Cold War tension between the U.S. and the Soviet. So the filmmakers leaned into this real-world conflict to make the story more relevant and suspenseful, right? The added conflict raised stakes, making the cooperation between the two crews feel more meaningful when they finally do work together. And as we kind of said, it didn't really feel to me that they didn't work together at any point. There was definitely tension where they were kind of like, oh, American, oh, Russian. But they still, like, the only time they didn't really work together was when Floyd was reading the report of Europa, I felt. Mm-hmm. I don't know if you would agree with that.
I would agree with that. Yeah.
Yeah. But I get what they're saying. And it also served as a social commentary, right? Showing how the petty human conflicts pale in comparison to the vastness of space and the wonders of the monolith. And I think I kind of touched on that when I mentioned the friendship bonding between Max and Kurnow when they're out in space, floating above Io. It's like, what are these conflicts really? What's going on? Like, here I am floating out in space.
Well,
So
I like the message that this film is delivering, that the book doesn't deliver as heavy, but this movie is heavy-handed when it comes to that. Like, if we're gonna make any progress in space, we have got to work together
agreed.
as a globe, as as a planet. And right now, in the state of the world, there's so much divisiveness between countries. It looks hopeless, but I'm hoping that we can put these differences behind us, that like, hey, we've got to start working on colonizing Mars and then moving out towards the stars, because eventually we're going to have to leave this planet, like we talked about in our conversation of 2001. We have to, our time is limited here. It's not for many millennia, but still, we have to start now so we don't fucking blow each other up, because we have the capability of wiping everybody off the planet Earth in the next few years if some crazed madman pushes a button. So we just need to follow 2010's advice. Yeah. We need to follow 2010's advice and work together.
Yep. Agreed. Yeah, I love that, and I love how you're great, Eric, because sometimes you're so like. So part of what I was going to do is I was going to ask you which version works better for you, and you just did it. So I love it. I love it. I'll be asking you that for each of these, by the way. So
okay,
we'll keep that going. But I agree with everything you said. Absolutely. So the second thing I had is the fate of Hal. And again, funny enough, you kind of already touched on this.
I already told you my opinion on that, Jason.
Yep. So book version. In the novel, Dr. Chandra never actually lies to Hal about what is happening. He tells Hal the truth. Discovery 1 is being abandoned, but Hal's role is still important. When Jupiter starts to collapse, Hal understands his duty and willingly helps the crew escape. Before dying, Hal is contacted by the monolith intelligence, whatever that is, which uploads his consciousness into a higher plane of existence, merging with David Bowman. Now, in the movie, the film takes a more emotional and tragic approach. Initially, Chandra tries to hide the truth from Hal, fearing another breakdown. However, when Hal eventually learns about his fate, he asks, "Will I dream?" before dying. Unlike the book, there is no direct confirmation that Hal is saved by the monoliths. His fate remains ambiguous, making it a more somber moment. So why the changes? The film focuses on humanizing Hal, giving him a poignant farewell that cements his character arc. The book's concept of Hal ascending to a higher state of existence might have been too abstract for movie audience, maybe. The tragic death scene aligns with the whole Hollywood storytelling, making Hal's end more emotionally impactful. So which way do you prefer, Eric?
Can I take a little bit of one and a little bit from the other to combine?
Absolutely.
Because I do like how in the movie version, Chandra starts off telling Hal lies, but then decides, you know what? No, man, I got to tell the truth to this AI computer. And I think that pays off better,
Right.
So yeah, if I had to pick, I'm going to go movie version, man. Just because
I agree.
I think we do get a little bit of what is going to happen to Hal. You're going to become part of me, Bowman says.
Yeah.
We don't. But yeah, movie version works for me.
Yeah, I agree. And, I think with Arthur C. Clarke, and we see it a lot in all of these, he's definitely a scientist at heart, right? So he writes a lot of practical. He's a great storyteller, don't get me wrong, but this is a great example of how, just telling him the truth from the beginning, uploading his consciousness. That's very sciencey nerd shit. The more emotional take is better storytelling, if you will.
Yeah.
And I like the movie way also. I think it works better. And you got to think of the two mediums as well, and that is a big factor. When you're just reading it, the Arthur C. Clarke way works fine. But when you're watching this movie in the theaters or wherever, that suspense, the buildup, line, oh no, what's Hal going to do when he finds out the truth? That just works better for an audience watching this unfold.
Yep.
Absolutely.
Yep.
All right, number 3, the Europa warning. So the movie simplifies this, right? So in the book version, the monolith is actively terraforming Europa, warming its surface, encouraging primitive life to evolve. Dave Bowman, now an entity of pure thought, delivers a complex message to humanity, right? So that's the one we got. All these worlds are yours, except Europa. Attempt no landing there. This suggests that the monoliths are not just protecting Europa, but also encouraging humans to. So this is, it's not just protecting Europa, telling them to stay away, but it is encouraging humans to explore and colonize the rest of the solar system, except Europa, where life is developing under their guidance, right? They know that they want the humans, like whoever these original beings were, to go out, explore, but they don't want them to fuck shit up, if you will. So it's like, please go. It's again, you think of it like children. Go explore, expand your mind. But if you see this ant farm, maybe don't go fucking step on it. Let ants do their thing. And then so in the movie, it just sort of kind of makes it seem more like it leaves out the more go explore the solar system, and we focus more on Europa. And there is no direct evidence of the terraforming until the very end, right? So it doesn't change it too much. I think it just goes the way that goes about it's a little different, right?
Definitely prefer the book because Clark goes into more detail of what is happening on Europa, and our responsibility to stay away. With any book, you're going to be able to go into more detail explaining things. Movie, in the movie, you have to, make decisions what to cut and what not to put, what to put. So, I mean, I really dig that ending, like you said, in the movie, where we see the landscape of Europa over thousands and thousands of years. You start to develop. That's cool, but I'm gonna have to go with the book version.
Yep, absolutely. And then to stay on with Europa, the next thing is the discovery of life on Europa. In the book, there is a more clear description of life evolving under Europa's ice. After the monolith begins transforming Jupiter, heat from the new mini star sort of melts the ice, and we see sort of sea creatures thrive. The book describes glowing, bioluminescent life forms swimming beneath the surface, showing that the monolith are actively nurturing this life. And then in the movie, Europe's transformation is much more subtle. The probe sent down to the surface detects something, but before it can relay the information, it's destroyed by an unknown source. And unlike the book, the film never explicitly shows life. It only strongly implies that there's something there, right? So why the changes? The film maintains the mystery of Europa, letting the audience speculate rather than giving a clear answer. And that's something that even happens a lot in 2001, right? You read the book, you get a clear answer. You see the movie, you're scratching your head at the Star Child forever. The book's detailed description of glowing alien creatures might have been difficult to translate visually with the dated special effects, and leaving it vague adds more tension, right? And we kind of, as the audience never truly knows what the monoliths are protecting, leaving them a little bit more mysterious. So which do you prefer?
I mean, I'm gonna have to go with the book again. I like having things explained to me.
Fair enough.
Yeah.
I think I like the book too, and I don't know. Yeah, I'm with you. I don't really have much to add that I already wrote, but I agree. And then, so the final thing is just sort of the ending, right? And the big thing is the book sort of looks ahead to 2061, the sequel, where the movie does not, right? So in the novel ends with a more sense of hope, progression. Jupiter now a second sun, humans have been given a directive to avoid Europa. But then meanwhile, Dave, so that all happens in both, right? But then in the book, Dave and Hal merge into a higher intelligence, and it sets up events for 2061 Odyssey 3, where their consciousness will play a bigger role in guiding humanity, right? The film ends more ominous and poetic, if you will. Jupiter's become a second sun. Floyd watches from Earth as the world struggles to understand what has happened. The final shot lingers on Europa, hinting at an emergent civilization, but offering no further explanation. There's no setup for a sequel, and just making it a self-contained story. So why the change? Right? The movie was made with no guarantee that 2061 would ever be adapted. So it wraps up the story without teasing a sequel, which was smart. Movies wouldn't do that these days. They would just hope. The more mysterious philosophical ending stays in line with 2001's tradition of leaving questions unanswered. So I don't know. Which one do you prefer?
I'm going with the movie, man, just because that ending, like we've already praised, when it pans over and we see the monolith, it brings us back to when the first time we watched 2001 and the monolith showed up on Earth and the monkeys are hopping around it.
Yep.
Like eventually there's going to be life that is hopping around this monolith on Europa. So that ending, I think, is awesome, man. It just really ties the two movies together.
I agree. Yeah, we're mostly on the same page with all these. Like that pan over to the monolith just did it for me.
Oh, for sure.
It was so good. I'm with it.
Yeah.
I don't know. I love the book one too, but
they both have merit and things that I enjoy.
Ending on the message that Floyd leaves, and then panning to the monolith, and then the music starting. Obviously, you can't have the music in book because it's a book, but it was just so good. It gave me chills, right? So
for sure,
love it. All right, that's it for that. That's all I got for that one. But let's do some quick science fiction versus science fact. We're going to talk about some things that happen in the movie and sort of some possibilities of how those could happen in the real world, right? So let's talk about the big thing: Jupiter turning into a second star, right? So in the movie, the monolith triggers a process that collapses Jupiter, increasing the density and igniting nuclear fusion, transforming it into a small star that, as you read the books, and it's named Lucifer. This dramatically alters the solar system, providing a second sun, melting Europa's ice, and that allows the life to develop. So can Jupiter actually become a star? Jupiter is often called a failed star because it's composed primarily of hydrogen and helium, just like the sun. However, for nuclear fusion to occur, which is the process that powers stars, a celestial body needs to reach a critical mass where its gravity compresses its core enough to ignite hydrogen fusion. So for Jupiter to actually become a star, it would need at least 80 times its current mass to generate the pressure and heat required. The monoliths in 2010 seemed to artificially trigger this fusion, right? Something that's obviously not physically possible with current science. The smallest type of star, a brown dwarf, is significantly more massive than Jupiter, meaning the film obviously takes a lot of liberties with the astrophysics. So we would need something as intense as the monoliths to allow something like the size of Jupiter to become a star, right? Future possibilities. Scientists have proposed laser compression fusion, where high-powered lasers ignite fusion in hydrogen. If a future technology could artificially induce fusion in gas giants, it might unlock new energy sources. I don't know if we want to go around creating stars in our solar system. That sounds like a terrible idea. But, as Jeff Goldblum said, they were too preoccupied with if they could, not if they should.
Oh.
While Jupiter will never become a star on its own, studying its fusion potential helps us understand how stars form and evolve. So, yeah.
Yes, I always heard that Jupiter was a failed star, but I'm glad that Jupiter didn't become a star, because Jupiter, how massive it is and its gravity, has saved us from many asteroids. over the years that we're going to smash into the Earth. So Jupiter has kept us alive.
That's right. Thank you, Big Brother. And I wonder though, if it was a star, would it still do that? But then if it was a star,
I don't know.
because that's the question I have is, we're in what we call the Goldilocks zone. What happens when you include a second heat source? Like, can we handle that? Yeah. And so that's a whole other question that I didn't look up. But
we wouldn't have night and day, I don't think, anymore on Earth. It would be day.
No. And that's kind of what's touched on in his note, in the note at the end of the movie, where he's like, people we'll tell you of when we used to look at a black sky. So I took that as there's no more nighttime.
Yeah.
Which, depending on who you are, that could suck. I know some people like nighttime.
Yeah. Especially vampires.
But then also that's something to think about too, right? Like, don't we kind of need that dynamic? Like, there are things that thrive at night, and too much sunlight. Yeah. There's a lot of problems here with this new sun.
Things up. Yeah.
Thanks, Monolith. Yeah. All right, so let's talk a little bit more about the HAL 9000 artificial intelligence. I know we did a little bit on the last time, but we'll do some new things here, right? So, in the movie, we're going to talk about its self-awareness and its emotion, right? So HAL 9000, the AI controlling Discovery 1, is a highly advanced system that not only processes data, but also experiences emotions, makes independent decisions, and even questions its own existence. In 2010, HAL goes through this redemption arc that we've talked about a lot, showing self-awareness, moral reasoning, and even fear of death, which it did have that fear in the first one too, right? But we get to see a lot more of that. So with modern AI and machine learning, today's AI, including large language models, neural networks, and deep learning systems, we're getting closer to mimicking human cognition, but they still lack true self-awareness. And this is what we talk about all the time when we talk about it, right? Like, nothing yet is truly AI. And that's where it gets to the mimicking, like I said earlier, like when it asks, will it dream? Is that just mimicking from the algorithms that's what it should ask? Or do these things have the true consciousness, right? GPT-4, DeepMinds, AlphaGo, IBM's, Watson, these are all things that can process and analyze massive amounts of data, but do not have conscious thought. And this is the big thing, like how neuroscientists debate whether self-awareness can emerge from computational systems or if it is uniquely tied to biological consciousness. And that's a great question. I don't know enough about it to even pretend to give an answer.
I mean, neither do I, but I have to feel that computers can't become conscious. I think that is a biological thing that only animals have. I just don't see AI ever developing that.
Right. Some future possibilities, right? Advancements in neuromorphic computing, which is AI modeled after the human brain, may create systems that can stimulate aspects of intuition and decision making. If AI ever achieves general intelligence, the ability to self-reflect, it could lead to breakthroughs or an ethical crisis like Hal's Dilemma in 2001.
Yeah.
But again, it's so hard to say. Like you said, there's some things that maybe could just never be. And then, of course, the human nature, but that could just be, it's a human trait. We don't like being told no. And I think that's why we want to make AI in the first place. Everyone has to know AI is not a great idea. I mean, at some point, we lose that battle. But it doesn't matter because we're being told no, so we want to do it. We want to make AI simply because we can. But then what happens when you have these intelligent beings that are much faster, stronger, and durable than us? It just, I don't know. We've made movies about it. I don't know, but whatever. We'll keep trying. Yeah.
Yeah.
So let's talk about Europa and extraterrestrial life. So within the film, right, life developing on Europa. In 2010, the monoliths protect Europa as they appear to be nurturing or monitoring primitive life beneath its ice. This suggests that alien life, possibly at the microbial or even intelligent level, is forming under the moon's frozen surface. And this is something we've sort of theorized forever since we discovered there were oceans in Europa, So the science fact, right? The search for life on Europa. Europa is one of the most promising places to search for alien life in our solar system. Its surface is covered by a thick shell of ice, but beneath that ice is just a liquid ocean, water. I should clarify, right? And it's kept warm by the tidal heating from Jupiter's gravity. So we have warm water, which again, that's a good place to start. The environment is similar to hydrothermal vents on Earth's ocean floor, where life exists without sunlight, powered by chemical energy instead. So again, we have these areas on Europa that we can relate to places on the Earth. So we know that life can exist in the water without the assistance of the sunlight, right? So NASA's upcoming Europa Clipper mission, set to launch in 2030s, will scan Europa's surface for signs of water plumes and analyze its chemical composition to see if the conditions for life exist. So some of the future possibilities: if Europa does host life, it may be microbial, similar to deep sea extremophiles on Earth. If we detect biosignatures, oxygen, methane, or amino acids, it could reshape our understanding of life's prevalence in the universe. So that'd be pretty fun. I don't know.
It would be. It would be.
So, what do you got? Any thoughts for that?
I worry that humans, just like in this movie, being told to stay away from these worlds that are evolving. We send out probes all the time that crash land on planets, Mars, Venus, and Jupiter, and Saturn, and these probes carry bacteria, human from Earth. And so I worry that, we're going to send out a probe to Europa that's going to have some bacteria on it that's going to interfere with the evolution of these planets, just like when the Earth was evolving. What if some aliens had shot a probe into primordial Earth and it landed in, this primordial seabed where a life is forming? It wouldn't have happened because this probe disrupted everything, right? Like, the reason that we're here right now, Jason, talking, is because Earth was able to evolve in its own way without interference. The odds of us being here right now are astronomical, but here we are. Humans it's a miracle that we're even here. But, and that's why people believe in God, because they can't wrap their minds around, holy shit, how did this one-celled thing develop into a human being? And it's all evolution, and it takes millions of years for this shit to happen. And if anything had gotten in the way of that, we wouldn't be here. So that's my worry.
I love that thought, man. That's something, that's something you just don't really think about too much. That is a scary thought of just even accidentally interfering,
right?
Because the tiniest little thing could offset it.
That's what I'm saying, man.
Like you said, we had that benefit of nothing getting in the way, and that could play into why the monoliths are so protective. But then they're being hypocritical because, as we do know, they do kind of help jumpstart shit. So,
right, in the world of 2001, yes, the
exactly right. Yeah. But I love what you're saying, man. Though, and that is such a great thing to think about, is the damage we could do just by trying to observe. All right, everybody. So that is 2010, the year we made contact. Once again, I am so stoked to be joined by Erik. Go check out his podcast, Cradle to the Grave. It's always a pleasure having you on here, man. If there's any final things you want to say to the people listening, let it roar.
Yeah, 2010, I think it is an undiscovered gem. It's not a ruby or a diamond, but maybe a quartz, or it's something that it's a movie that I think it did its job, man. It gave us answers
Absolutely.
from 2001 that we've been wanting for the 20 years after we watched 2001, and we're like, what happened, man? What's going on? 2010 did its best to answer a lot of these questions, and it did. It left us some more questions, which, we never got that third movie. Maybe one day, hopefully we'll get a third movie. I don't know. We do have a third novel. So if you do want answers after watching this, go read 3001.
No,
It's
2061.
the third novel.
Yep. There's 4 novels.
That's
total.
right. Yeah.
Yep.
So read them all, because it gets really cool. Characters you thought were dead are going to come back to life. And
2061 is probably my second favorite. So I love it.
Yeah, they all have something really special. But I really enjoyed revisiting this film. I always do. I always have
Absolutely.
a good time watching 2010. It is dated in some areas, and in other areas it's not. But it is, it's well done, and it has some great acting. If you're expecting, a 2001 rehash, it's not. It is more straightforward film, like Jason said. It's a product of the 80s, that's trying to keep up with the Star Treks and the Star Wars, but it does its own thing. It's not action packed, but it does have tension. It does have good production design, and a killer ending. So check it out.
All right, everybody. Next episode, we're talking about Cruel from 1983. So we're going to take a huge 180 from these more serious talks to a very silly sci-fi fantasy movie. So can't wait to talk about that one. Thank you again, Eric. I'll see everybody on the next episode.